Hello everyone, and welcome to Databases and Tables. In this section, we're going to focus on creating and restoring databases and make heavy use of pgAdmin, that graphical user interface or GUI that we previously installed. pgAdmin is a great tool, and it's going to save you a lot of time for these specific types of tasks of restoring a database or creating a new database, etc. Later on, we're going to learn more about direct SQL syntax, like select or order by, where, that kind of thing. So don't worry too much about focusing on the SQL syntax right now. In this particular section, we're just going to use pgAdmin so that you feel comfortable in creating and restoring databases in case you ever want to create or restore a database to practice your SQL syntax queries later on. So it's important that we get this down really well first before we actually move into learning direct SQL syntax and programming queries out. So don't worry, that's all coming, but we're going to focus right now on pgAdmin so you feel comfortable with creating and restoring databases. With all that being said, let's go ahead and get started. I'll see you at the next lecture. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Creating and Restoring a Database lecture. In this lecture, what we're going to do is create a base with the pgAdmin graphical user interface or GUI console, and then we're going to restore a database and learn how to delete a database. Something to note here is basically when we were installing the original DVD rental database, we were kind of doing it, especially for the Windows installation, through a very manual command line process. What we're going to do now is show you how you would actually probably do this if you were implementing PostgreSQL at work. You would just use the pgAdmin console and save yourself a lot of time. So let's go ahead and jump to the pgAdmin console. Okay. So I'm here at the pgAdmin console, and what I have is DVD rental and Postgres. Remember, DVD rental was our first installation of the sample database. What we're going to do now is show you how you can do it basically much quicker and much simpler using the pgAdmin 3 console. What you're going to do is, on databases, right-click and select New Database. And then go ahead and name your database. We'll call this DVD2, then click OK. And now you'll notice now we have the DVD2 database created for us. Remember last time we had to use a SQL query and we said create space database and then the name of the database with a semicolon. Here we just did it by the right click with the GUI console. So just to show you a reminder of how we did it last time, remember I selected Postgres and then I selected SQL to execute a SQL query, brought up my SQL editor, and the way you would do this in pure SQL, you would say create database and then the name of your database, which you could say, let's say test DVD and then semicolon to end, to let it know that's the end of the line. That's all you want to write. And then we'll click run. Query returned successfully. This is exactly what we did last time. And then on databases, if you just hit refresh, now we have a new test DVD database. So it's up to you what you prefer. I would imagine most people just like the right click of creating a database. So let's go over how to delete a database. We'll delete test DVD right now. The most convenient way to do it using pgAdmin is right click, select delete drop, and then we'll go ahead and just drop that database. All right, so we have DVD rental and DVD2. Now remember, DVD rental is already filled. If we go to schemas and public, it already has the tables for the actual database, which we did in a very manual way. Now let's see how we can do that in a little bit of a nicer way to DVD2. So if we look at the schemas, the public schemas for DVD2, notice we don't have any tables or anything right now. It's because we haven't actually populated this database with any information. So let's go ahead and use pgAdmin in order to do that. What you're going to do is go ahead and right click DVD2 and go ahead and click restore. So restore is going to allow us to actually search for that .tar file. So if you click these three dots, you'll get a pop-up. If you remember from the Windows installation video for the DVD rental database, I had my .tar file in this folder under Computer, OSC, Program Files, PostgreSQL. You may still have it under the Downloads folder, but notice I don't actually see it. I just see that 9.5 folder. So if you remember, I had my .tar file over here. The reason it's not showing up is because right now we're exclusively looking for .backup files. So what I want to say is look for all files, and now I can see the .tar file right there, and I can click open, and then just click restore. And it will take a little bit of time, but it will restore everything and basically fill out all those tables. Select done. Let's go ahead and then refresh DVD2 database, and now you'll notice it has all the same tables as the original DVD rental where we did this manually with the command line. Alright, so now you know basically two ways of creating and restoring databases. The first is the more manual way when we basically walk through the installation of DVD rental. The second one is kind of the nicer way with the GUI. So right-clicking on databases, saying new databases. Once you've created the new database, you can right-click and say restore. Okay, so that's fully restoring a database with all the information. What we're going to do next is learn how to restore a database with just the table schema, meaning we just want the tables and everything set up with all the relationships, but we don't actually want the data information in there. That's a little bit trickier, so we'll cover it in the next lecture. Alright, let's go ahead and do a quick review of what we just did. Okay, so just as a quick overview, we learned how to create a database with pgAdmin using the graphical user interface specifically. Learned how to use it to also restore a database and delete a database. Remember, just using right-clicking and those drop-down menus, so that makes it very easy. So now you kind of have two ideas of how to create and restore databases. I think you'll agree with me that the second one, using the GUI, is quite a bit easier and will save you a lot of time. Up next, we're going to learn how to restore just a table schema. So you can imagine that maybe you are opening up a new DVD rental store. So you want to restore a new database with all the same table schema, but with no data because you're opening up a new DVD rental store, and now you want to set up a database but have it empty so you can later on add stuff to it. Okay, so that'll be up in the next lecture. Thanks, and I'll see you there. Hello everyone, and welcome to this lecture on restoring a database table schema only. So in this lecture, we're going to learn how to restore a database, but with only the table schema. And the table schema is the table names and the data types that belong in that table, but doesn't actually contain any data. So this is actually a really common task that you should know well, and the reason for that being is if you ever find yourself needing in a real-world situation to put the database schema somewhere else, you don't want to actually copy over the data, either because you're going to be filling it out with new data or because you have privacy concerns where the information in that data in your original database is private, and if you're going to copy that database schema over to a development server, you don't actually want to copy private user information into your new database. So that's why this is actually such a common task, and pgAdmin is actually going to make it really easy. So let's go ahead and jump to pgAdmin now. So I'm going to go ahead and get started by opening up pgAdmin. Okay, so here I am at the pgAdmin terminal, or window if you will, and you'll notice I right now have 3 databases given the previous stuff that we set up. I'm going to show you 2 things and 2 different ways that you could do this sort of restore. One is to restore it into a database that already has the data. So if I go ahead and expand DVD rental, schemas public, you'll notice that I have the 15 tables, and if I were to click on one of these individual tables and look over at rows, it estimates that there's about 200 rows there. So there is actual data in this. And if you double click this, you can then begin to explore the columns, etc. So this table, this database of DVD rental has all the tables and it has all the data. So keep that in mind. Something I'm going to do first is create a new database. So I can do that either through the command line or simply by right-clicking on databases and saying new database. And I will name this database, let's just say only schema. I will say OK. Let it go ahead and create that database. All right, so now I have my only schema database. And you notice if I check the public schemas, I don't have any tables here. So what I'm going to do is to take full advantage of pgAdmin here and right click and say restore. So this whole process should look familiar to you, since this was the first way when we restored and created a full database. I have my format equal to custom or tar, and I have my file name, which is that dvdrental.tar file. So here's the link to where my file is. Go ahead and make sure the file path to where yours is correct, or you can click on these three dots to continue exploring. So the caveat here being, I don't actually want to copy the entire data set, I just want to copy the table schema. So how do I do that? I can go to Restore Options, number 1, and you'll see here under Type of Objects, it'll say Only Schema. And that's exactly what I want to do. So I want to make sure I click that so I don't actually take in any of that data. And if I click Restore and wait a little bit while it works, you'll notice it says process return Xcode 0, meaning everything worked out. And if I click Done, we should hopefully, if we make sure we refresh this so that everything looks good, you'll see I have tables here. So under my only schema database, I was able to restore those tables. And let's make sure it actually worked by selecting the actor table. And now you'll notice I have 0 rows. So I've copied and restored all the table schema, including the columns of the types that it's expecting, but the actual data is no longer there. So it has no rows of data. It just has the table schema that it expects. Okay, so that's how you would do that if you were creating a new database for that table schema only restore. Now let's say I wanted to restore it onto an existing database that already had the data. So for example, my DVD rental database here, if I go to tables, remember if I check actor, it already has 200 rows of that data. So how could I restore this database so that it only has the schema? Essentially just get rid of all that data, but keep the table schema. Well, I can do that in a really similar manner. I right-click DVD rental, click restore, wait for it to load. I'm going to restore it again from that .tar file. Under Restore Options number 1, I'm going to say Only Schema. And this is where you have to remember the additional step if your database still contains data. You're going to go to Restore Options number 2, and what you're going to do is say Clean Before Restore. And that's essentially just going to clean away any data that is currently in that database before you restore it. That way you don't accidentally retain the data and you only pass in the data schema, or the table schema, excuse me. So let's go ahead and restore this and make sure it all worked. Go ahead and give it some time. Looks like it finished, so I'm going to select Done. And now, if I go ahead and refresh this, DVD rental, I go to my tables, I have all of them, and if I check actor, now you notice that the DVD rental database that previously had all the data is now just containing that table schema, so that relationship of all the tables and the columns it's expecting, with none of the actual rows of data. All right, perfect. So that's how you can restore a database with just the table schema and no data along with it. All right, everyone. Thanks, and I will see you at the next lecture.